In the spring of 1945, as the Third Reich collapsed into rubble and surrender, one small pistol sat in holsters and desk drawers across the wreckage of Berlin. It was compact enough to hide inside a coat pocket, trusted enough to be carried by the men who ran the police and military machinery of Nazi Germany, and by the last week of April it had already been present at one of the most infamous deaths of the war. This is the story of that pistol, and of the strange path that carried it from a collapsing regime's holster into the hand of one of fiction's most famous secret agents. The story starts more than half a century earlier, in a small gun-making workshop in the town of Zella-Mehlis, in what is now the German state of Thuringia. Karl Walther opened that workshop in 1886, building hunting and target rifles for a modest local trade. His sons carried the business forward, and his eldest, Fritz Walther, pushed the firm into the new technology of the age, the self-loading pistol. In 1929, the company released its most influential design yet, a compact double-action police pistol known simply as the Polizeipistole, the police pistol for short. 2 years later, in 1931, an even smaller version followed, built for plainclothes detective work and named the criminal model, the criminal investigation model, known ever after by its short-spoken name, the PPK. When the Nazi Party seized power in 1933, the Army's ordinary field officers carried the older Luger design, but the smaller, sleeker Walther became the sidearm of choice for Navy and Luftwaffe officers, senior Army commanders, and the men who ran the party's police apparatus. The Gestapo carried it, officers of the SS carried it. Nazi officials bought engraved versions as personal status pieces, some fitted with grips moulded around the party's eagle emblem. By some estimates, well over 100,000 of the compact pistols were built for German forces and police during the Nazi years. In 1939, for Hitler's 50th birthday, the Walther firm presented him with an ornately finished, gold-engraved police pistol as a personal gift. By then, the design was not just a tool the regime carried, it had become one of the regime's own symbols. That symbolism turned grim in the final days of the war. As Soviet forces closed in on Berlin in April of 1945, Adolf Hitler took his own life inside his underground bunker on the 30th of that month, biting down on a cyanide capsule and firing a Walther pistol in the same moment. He died beside his new wife, Eva Braun, who had taken poison of her own only minutes before. Hitler was far from the only officer who reached for a sidearm rather than face cap. Across the collapsing German officer corps, men who could not accept surrender or a war crimes tribunal turned to the pistols already sitting in their holsters, and the compact Walther, standard issue to so many of them, became forever tied to the way the regime chose to end. The exact pistol Hitler used that afternoon was never recovered. It vanished sometime after Berlin fell, likely taken as a battlefield trophy by one of the Soviet soldiers who searched the bunker, or quietly kept by one of the last people to leave before the surrender. To this day, no museum or archive can produce it, and its final resting place remains one of the small unsolved mysteries left over from the war's final days. Other wartime examples of the same design fared better. Standard issue and presentation. Walthers from the Nazi period survive today in institutional collections, including the Imperial War Museums in Britain, preserved less as working firearms than as physical evidence of how deeply the design was woven into the machinery of the regime that carried it. The company that built the pistol did not survive the peace either, at least not in the place that made it. Zella-Mehlis fell inside the Soviet occupation zone once the fighting stopped, and Soviet authorities began stripping the Walther factory of its machinery, moving much of it east. Fritz Walther, who had led the firm through the war years, was warned by 2 American soldiers that his family had only about an hour to pack up and leave before Soviet control tightened around the town for good. He managed to save almost nothing but a folder of design drawings and patents, the accumulated knowledge of 2 generations of gunmakers, and left the rest of the factory behind. The family crossed into the American occupation zone and settled far to the west, in the city of Ulm, with little more than that folder and a trade they carried in their hands. Rebuilding took years. Allied occupation law banned German gun manufacturing outright in the years right after the war, so Fritz Walther got by however he could, including running a small shoe repair operation while he waited for the restrictions to lift. When the ban finally eased in the early 1950s, the company resumed making pistols in its new home, and by 1953, the police pistol and its compact companion were back in production, this time for a police force built under a democratic government instead of a totalitarian one. The design that had once armed the Reich's police state was now equipping the police of the Republic that had replaced it. Meanwhile, on the other side of the new Iron Curtain, the design lived on in a different form entirely. Soviet engineers who had studied captured Walther pistols and technical material after the war drew heavily on the compact police pistol's layout when they built their own service pistol, the Makarov. That weapon went on to become the standard sidearm across the Soviet military and police for decades, and much of the Eastern Bloc alongside it. A single compact design out of a small German workshop had, without either side intending it, ended up arming police officers on both sides of the Cold War at once. Its next transformation came from an unlikely direction: fiction. In the early James Bond novels, author Ian Fleming had armed his spy with a small Italian pistol, the Beretta, carried in a shoulder holster. In 1956, a firearms enthusiast named Geoffrey Boothroyd wrote to Fleming and told him bluntly that the Beretta was underpowered, calling it more of a lady's gun than a serious weapon for a professional agent. Boothroyd pointed Fleming toward the Walther instead, and Fleming took the advice. Starting with his next novel, Bond carried the German pistol, and Fleming even named his fictional armourer character Major Boothroyd in the real expert's honour. When the character reached the screen in Dr. No in 1962, the swap became part of the story itself. Early in the film, the armourer takes Bond's old Beretta away and hands him the compact Walther in its place, telling him it is the far more reliable weapon. From that scene forward, the pistol built for Nazi Germany's police and military officers became the signature weapon of one of cinema's most famous secret agents, carried on screen from Dr. No in 1962 all the way through to 1995's GoldenEye. The film's release did more than change the character. Commercial demand for the compact Walther jumped noticeably in the years after Dr. No reached American theaters, as audiences learned the name of the pistol their favorite spy carried and went looking for one of their own. A design that once sold to police departments and Nazi officials on the strength of its size and reliability was now selling, in part, on the strength of a fictional secret agent's endorsement. The franchise later tried a newer Walther design, the P99, starting with Tomorrow Never Dies in 1997, and carried it through several sequels and into the first outing of a new lead actor in 2006. But by the very next film, the producers brought back the older, smaller design, and the compact Walther has remained the character's signature sidearm ever since, reappearing with a modernised, fingerprint-locked grip in the film Skyfall, as part of a deliberate return to the character's roots. The Ark is a strange one to hold inside a single small object. A pistol shaped in a workshop in Thuringia armed the police and officer corps of one of history's most destructive regimes, sat beside the bodies of men who chose death over capture, watched its birthplace fall behind the Iron Curtain, and rose again in a new German city as the tool of a democratic police force. Somewhere along that path, without ever leaving its original compact design, it became a piece of pop culture, recognized today far more often as a fictional spy's weapon of choice than as anything the Third Reich ever carried. Few objects fit that much history into a shape small enough for a coat pocket. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, you will likely enjoy our other looks at the objects and units that carried Nazi Germany's history into the post-war world. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you do not miss the next one.